In a small coastal town battered by relentless storms, the kind that whip the sea into a frenzy and tear shingles from rooftops, a woman named Clara stood at the edge of her porch, staring into the gray horizon. The wind howled, carrying the scent of salt and the distant rumble of thunder. Her hands, calloused from years of mending fishing nets, gripped the railing as she watched the waves crash against the shore. Clara's town was no stranger to hardship, decades of dwindling fish stocks, rising tides, and now a storm that threatened to swallow what little remained. Her neighbors were exhausted, their faces etched with worry, their voices sharp with frustration. Some had already packed their bags, ready to abandon the only home they'd ever known. Clara, though, couldn't leave. Not yet. Something held her here, a stubborn hope, a flicker of faith she couldn't quite explain. The world beyond Clara's town wasn't much different. Cities buzzed with noise, sirens, notifications, endless debates on screens that never slept. People rushed through crowded streets, their minds tangled in stress, their hearts heavy with disconnection. Families argued over dinner tables, colleagues clashed in boardrooms, and strangers hurled insults online, each voice louder than the last. In 2025, the world felt like a pressure cooker simmering with conflict, uncertainty, and a longing for something more. It was a time when people craved peace, but didn't know where to find it, when the weight of modern life, bills, deadlines, fractured relationships made it hard to breathe. Clara felt that weight too. Her husband Matteo had lost his job at the cannery months ago, and their savings were dwindling. Their teenage daughter, Sophia, spent hours locked in her room, her phone glowing like a lifeline to a world Clara didn't understand. The family barely spoke anymore, each of them carrying their own burdens in silence. Yet, as the storm raged outside, Clara remembered something, a phrase she'd heard during a homily at the weathered church down the road. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the courage to carry love through it. The words, spoken by Pope Francis during a visit to a war-torn region, had stayed with her like a seed planted in rocky soil. She didn't know how to live those words, but she wanted to try. Pope Francis, with his gentle voice and weathered hands, has spent years calling the world to peace, not a distant abstract ideal, but a living, breathing practice. In his 2020 encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, he wrote, "We are called to love everyone without exception. At the same time, loving an oppressor does not mean allowing him to keep oppressing us, or to think that what he does is acceptable. On the contrary, true love for an oppressor means seeking ways to make him cease his oppression." These words echo the teachings of Christ, who stood in the dust of Galilee and said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Matthew 5:9. Both Christ and Francis point to a truth that feels radical in a world of division. Peace begins with love, and love demands action. For Clara, this teaching felt like a lifeline, but also a challenge. How could she love her neighbors when they snapped at her in the grocery store, their tempers frayed by fear? How could she love Matteo when his silence felt like a wall between them? How could she love Sophia, whose anger seemed to push her further away each day? The storm outside mirrored the one inside her, a swirling mess of doubt, frustration, and a longing to make things right. She thought of Christ's words in John 16:33. "In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." If Christ could face betrayal, suffering, and death with love, maybe Clara could face her own storms with something like it. The first step, she realized, was to listen, not to the howling wind or the endless news reports, but to the people around her. Pope Francis often speaks of the culture of encounter, a way of meeting others with openness, even when it's hard. In a 2016 address, he said, "To listen to others, to enter into their lives, to understand their joys and struggles. This is the path to peace." Clara decided to start small. That evening, as the rain pounded the roof, she knocked on Sophia's door. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Sophia looked up from her phone, surprised, then nodded. They sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in months, Clara listened, really listened, as Sophia poured out her fears about the future, her frustration with the town, her feeling of being trapped. Clara didn't interrupt or offer solutions. She just held space, her hand resting on Sophia's. The next morning, Clara walked to the community center where volunteers were distributing supplies to families hit hardest by the storm. The room was chaotic, people shouting, children crying, boxes of canned goods teetering on tables. Clara spotted Mrs. Alvarez, an elderly widow who lived alone and rarely spoke to anyone. Her hands trembled as she tried to carry a bag of rice. Clara approached her, offering a smile. "Let me help," she said, taking the bag. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes softened, and for a moment the noise of the room faded. They talked as they walked to her car, and Clara learned that Mrs. Alvarez's roof was leaking her savings too meager to fix it. Clara promised to check in later, a small gesture that felt like a seed of connection. These moments listening to Sophia helping Mrs. Alvarez were small, but they shifted something in Clara. She began to see the people around her not as burdens or obstacles, but as fellow travelers in the storm. Pope Francis often says that peace is built through small gestures of love, like a ripple that spreads across a pond. In Laudato Si, he writes, "Everything is interconnected, and this invites us to develop a spirituality of that global solidarity which flows from the mystery of the Trinity." Clara didn't know much about theology, but she felt the truth of those words in her bones. Her actions, however small, were part of something bigger, a web of love that could hold her town together. Christ's teachings offer a blueprint for this kind of love. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10:25-37, a man stops to help a stranger beaten and left for dead while others pass by. The Samaritan doesn't ask if the man deserves help or if he's from the right tribe. He acts tending wounds, paying for care, showing mercy. Jesus ends the story with a command: "Go and do likewise." For Clara, this meant stepping into the mess of her town's struggles, even when she felt tired or afraid. It meant seeing Mateo's silence not as rejection, but as his own quiet battle with despair. It meant reaching out to Sophia, even when her daughter's words stung. Practically, Clara began to weave these teachings into her days. She started with her family. Each evening, she invited Mateo and Sophia to sit at the kitchen table, even if just for a few minutes. She asked open questions about their day, their hopes, their fears, and listened without judgment. Sometimes the conversations were awkward. Sometimes they led to arguments. But slowly the walls between them began to crack. Mateo shared his shame about losing his job, his fear of failing as a provider. Sophia admitted she felt invisible in a town that seemed to be dying. Clara didn't have answers, but she offered presence, and that was enough to start. In the community, Clara took on small roles, organizing a cleanup after the storm, checking on elderly neighbors, bringing coffee to the volunteers at the community center. She didn't preach or quote scripture. She just showed up. One day she overheard two fishermen arguing at the dock, their voices rising over a damaged boat. Instead of walking away, she approached them, asking calmly what happened. She listened as they vented, then suggested they work together to repair the boat, offering to bring tools from her shed. They hesitated, then agreed, and by the end of the day they were laughing over a shared thermos of coffee. It wasn't world peace, but it was a start. Pope Francis often speaks of peace as a craft, something we build with patience and persistence. In a 2023 homily, he said, "Peace is not a negotiation to be won, but a journey to be walked hand in hand with others." Clara's journey was just beginning, but she felt a shift, a lightness in her chest, a sense that she wasn't alone. Her faith, once a vague comfort, was becoming a lens through which she saw the world. Christ's call to love your neighbor wasn't just a nice idea. It was a practical guide for navigating the chaos of life. For those listening to Clara's story, the invitation is clear. Peace starts where you are with the people in front of you. It doesn't require grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It begins with a choice to listen, to help, to show up. Try this today. Find one person in your life, a family member, a coworker, a stranger, and really listen to them. Ask a question, offer a kind word, or lend a hand. Notice how it feels, how it shifts the air between you. Reflect on Christ's words in Matthew 25:40. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Your small acts of love are part of a larger story, one that weaves through the teachings of Christ and the vision of Pope Francis, a story of peace built one encounter at a time. Clara's town was still battered. The storm still loomed. But as she walked home that evening, the rain felt less like a threat and more like a cleansing. She thought of Sophia's tentative smile, Mrs. Alvarez's grateful nod, the fisherman's laughter. These were her ripples, her small steps toward peace. And as she stepped into her house, shaking the water from her coat, she felt a quiet strength rising within her, a strength rooted in love, grounded in faith, and ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed were no easier. The storm lingered, power lines flickered, and the town's tensions simmered. But Clara's small acts of love had sparked something. Neighbors began to notice her quiet presence, how she listened without judgment, how she offered help without expecting thanks. Word spread, and soon others joined her. A group of teenagers, including Sophia, started a cleanup crew hauling debris from the beach and piling it into trucks. Matteo, inspired by Clara's persistence, began fixing nets for the fishermen, his hands finding purpose again. The community center, once a place of chaos, became a hub of connection where people shared meals, stories, and plans for rebuilding. One evening, as Clara helped serve soup at the center, she overheard a conversation between two women who'd been feuding for years over a property line. They were sitting at the same table, their voices low but civil, passing a loaf of bread between them. Clara smiled to herself, remembering Pope Francis's words from Fratelli Tutti. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but it does mean refusing to let resentment define us. The women weren't best friends, but they were sharing a meal, and that was a miracle in itself. Clara's faith grew stronger through these moments. She began to pray each morning not for the storm to stop, but for the strength to love through it. She thought of Christ's example, how he washed the feet of his disciples, even knowing one would betray him. John 13:1-17. If Jesus could serve in the face of betrayal, Clara could serve in the face of hardship. Her prayers weren't long or eloquent. They were simple, like a conversation with a friend. "Help me see people the way you do," she'd whisper. "Help me keep going." For those walking their own journeys, Clara's story offers a practical path. Start where you are. If stress is overwhelming, take 5 minutes to breathe and pray, asking for clarity. If disconnection is pulling you apart, reach out to one person today. Call a friend. Write a note or sit with a family member. If conflict is brewing, try what Pope Francis calls the art of dialogue. Listen first, speak second, and seek understanding over victory. These steps aren't magic, but they're real. They're the bricks of peace laid one at a time. As the weeks passed, Clara's town began to heal, not because the storm stopped, but because its people started to see each other. The fishermen repaired their boats together. The teenagers painted murals on the community center walls, bright colors against the gray. Mrs. Alvarez's roof was fixed by a group of volunteers who laughed and sang as they worked. Clara didn't lead every effort, but she was there, a steady presence, a reminder that love could outlast any storm. And so the story of Clara's town became a testament to the vision of Pope Francis and the teachings of Christ, a vision of peace built not on the absence of struggle, but on the courage to love through it. For Clara, for her neighbors, and for all of us, the journey continues one small, faithful step at a time. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle, but the air in Clara's town still carried the weight of uncertainty. Streetlights flickered, casting uneven shadows on the cracked pavement, and the hum of generators filled the gaps where silence should have been. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the world settle into an uneasy calm. Her hands, still rough from days of hauling debris and serving meals, rested on the sink's edge. The community center had become a beacon of hope, but the town's wounds ran deep. Broken homes, strained relationships, and a creeping fear that the next storm might break them entirely. Clara felt it too. The exhaustion that gnawed at her bones, the doubt that whispered she wasn't doing enough. Yet as she dried her hands on a worn towel, she remembered a phrase from Pope Francis's Amoris Laetitia. Love is not merely a feeling, it is an act of will, a choice to seek the good of another. Those words felt like a compass guiding her through the fog. Across the world, that fog was thick. In 2025, cities pulsed with restless energy traffic jams, protest marches, and the constant ping of notifications that kept people tethered to their screens. Families drifted apart, not from anger, but from distraction, each member lost in their own digital orbit. Workplaces buzzed with competition, where colleagues vied for promotions while quietly battling burnout. Online arguments flared over politics, climate, and everything in between, each side digging deeper into their trenches. People longed for connection, for meaning, but the noise of modern life drowned out the still small voice of hope. Clara's town, though small, was a microcosm of this global ache, a place where people craved healing but didn't know where to start. Inside Clara's home, the air was quieter, but no less heavy. Mateo sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a chipped mug, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. He'd been working again, fixing nets and helping rebuild the dock, but his shoulders still carried the slump of defeat. Sophia, meanwhile, had thrown herself into the cleanup crew, her energy, a mix of defiance and purpose. Clara watched them both, her heart torn between gratitude for their progress and worry for the distance that lingered. She thought of Christ's words in Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest sounded like a dream, But Clara knew it wasn't just about sleep. It was about finding peace in the chaos, about trusting that love could carry them through. Pope Francis has often spoken of this kind of peace, one rooted in mercy and resilience. In a 2021 address, he said, "Mercy is the bridge that connects God and humanity, opening our hearts to the hope of being loved forever, despite our sinfulness." This echoes Christ's call in Luke 6:36. "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." For Clara, mercy was a lifeline, a way to meet her family and neighbors, not with judgment, but with compassion. It meant seeing Mateo's silence as a wound, not a wall. Sophia's rebellion as a search, not a rejection, and her town's anger as fear dressed in sharp words. Mercy, she realized, wasn't passive. It was a choice, a strength, a way to heal what was broken. Clara decided to lean into mercy, starting with her family. One evening, as the drizzle tapped the roof, she found Mateo alone in the garage sorting through old tools. Instead of asking about his day or pressing him to talk, she sat beside him, picking up a rusty wrench and wiping it clean. They worked in silence for a while, the clink of metal a quiet rhythm. Finally, Mateo spoke, his voice low. "I feel like I've let you down," he said, his eyes fixed on a screwdriver. "I should have found work sooner. I should have been stronger." Clara's heart ached, but she didn't rush to fix it. She touched his arm and said, "You're here now. That's enough." It wasn't a solution, but it was mercy, a moment of grace that let Mateo breathe. With Sophia, mercy looked different. Clara noticed her daughter's late nights at the community center, how she'd come home exhausted, but alive, her hands smudged with paint from the murals. One morning, Clara joined the cleanup crew not to check on Sophia, but to work beside her. They hauled branches and swept sand from the boardwalk, their movements syncing without words. When Sophia laughed at a joke from another teen, Clara saw a spark in her daughter's eyes, a glimpse of the girl who used to dance in the rain. Later, as they rested on a bench, Sophia said, "I didn't think you'd care about this stuff." Clara smiled. "I care about you," she said. It was a small bridge, but it was enough to start crossing. In the town, mercy took shape in unexpected ways. Clara began noticing the people who slipped through the cracks, the ones who didn't shout or demand help, but whose silence spoke volumes. There was Javier, a fisherman, whose boat had been destroyed, now working odd jobs to feed his kids. Clara saw him at the community center, his head bowed as he accepted a plate of food. She sat with him, asking about his children, listening as he shared their dreams of college and his fear of failing them. Before she left, she slipped him a list of local carpenters looking for help, a quiet act of mercy that didn't solve everything, but gave him a step forward. Pope Francis often speaks of mercy as a revolution, a force that transforms hearts and communities. In Misericordiae Vultus, he writes, "Mercy is not an abstract idea, but a concrete reality with which we reveal God's love." Clara felt this in her town's slow healing, the way neighbors began to share tools, the way old grudges softened over shared meals. She thought of Christ's parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15:11-32, where a father welcomes his wayward child not with anger, but with a feast. The father's mercy didn't erase the son's mistakes. It gave him a new beginning. Clara wanted to offer that to her town, a chance to start again, not by ignoring the pain, but by meeting it with love. Practically, Clara wove mercy into her days. She started carrying a small notebook jotting down names and needs. Mrs. Alvarez's leaky roof. Javier's job, search the single mom who needed childcare. Each morning she prayed over the list, asking for wisdom to help. Some days she could only offer a kind word or a listening ear. Other days she connected people with resources like the church's repair fund or the town's new job board. She didn't try to fix everything she couldn't, but she showed up, and that made a difference. One afternoon, Clara walked to the dock where a group of fishermen were arguing over dwindling supplies. Their voices were sharp, their faces red with frustration. Clara didn't interrupt. She stood nearby stacking crates, her presence calm but steady. When the shouting eased, she asked, "What's the biggest problem here?" They hesitated, then spilled their worries. Broken nets, empty waters, bills piling up. Clara listened, then said, "What if we shared what we have? Nets, boats, even time." It wasn't a new idea, but her tone gentle, not judging, made them pause. By the end of the week, 3 fishermen had pooled their gear working as a team. It wasn't perfect, but it was mercy in action. Clara's small acts rippled outward. Sophia's cleanup crew grew, drawing in kids who'd once spent their days on their phones. They painted murals of waves and stars, turning scarred walls into stories of hope. Mateo, inspired by Clara's notebook, started a repair co-op, teaching others to fix nets and furniture. The community center became a place of laughter, as well as work with potlucks and game nights that brought people together. Clara saw Christ's words in John 13:34, "Come alive, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." Love wasn't just a feeling, it was a verb, a doing, a building. For those listening, Clara's story offers a challenge. Where can you show mercy today? It doesn't have to be grand. If a coworker snaps at you, pause before responding. See their stress, not just their words. If a family member withdraws, sit with them even in silence. If a stranger needs help, offer what you can, a smile, $1 a moment of your time. Pope Francis reminds us in a 2022 homily, mercy is not weakness, it is the strength to see the other as a brother or sister. Try this each day. Choose one person to meet with mercy. Notice their struggle, offer a small kindness, and see how it shifts you both. Clara's faith deepened through these acts. She began to see prayer not as a ritual, but as a conversation that grounded her. Each evening she sat by her window, the drizzle a soft backdrop, and spoke to God about her day, the people she'd met, the burdens she carried, the hope she clung to. She thought of Christ's mercy on the cross, forgiving those who crucified him. Luke 23:34. If Jesus could love through that, Clara could love through her town's storms. Her prayers were simple. Show me how to help. Keep my heart open. The town wasn't healed overnight. Arguments still flared, roofs still leaked, and the future remained uncertain. But something had shifted. People began to look at each other not as rivals or strangers, but as neighbors. The fishermen shared their catches. The teenagers taught younger kids to paint, and the community center buzzed with plans for a new playground. Clara didn't lead every effort, but her mercy, her choice to see and serve, had lit a spark. One evening, as Clara served stew at the center, she saw Javier walk in, his face brighter than before. He'd found steady work with a carpenter thanks to her tip. He hugged her, his voice thick. "You didn't have to care," he said. Clara smiled. I wanted to." Across the room she saw Matteo laughing with a group of men, his shoulders lighter. Sophia was there too, showing a younger girl how to mix paint. Clara's heart swelled not with pride, but with gratitude. She thought of Pope Francis's words, "Mercy is the very heart of God." In that moment, she felt it, a heart beating through her town, through her family, through her. For those walking this path, Clara's story is a reminder. Mercy is your strength, your revolution. It's the choice to see the weary, the angry, the broken, and to love them anyway. Start small. Forgive one grudge. Help one person listen one time. Reflect on Christ's call. In Matthew 5:7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Your acts, however small, are threads in a tapestry of peace woven through the teachings of Christ and the vision of Pope Francis. As the drizzle faded and stars peeked through the clouds, Clara stepped outside, the air cool against her skin. The town was still scarred, the future still uncertain, but she felt a quiet certainty. Mercy had carried her this far, and it would carry her further. She thought of her notebook, the names and needs still waiting, and she smiled. There was work to do, love to give, and a town to rebuild, one merciful step at a time. The stars hung low over Clara's town, their light piercing the thinning clouds as the drizzle finally ceased. The streets, still slick with rain, reflected the glow of lanterns swinging from porches. Clara walked slowly toward the community center, her boots crunching on gravel, her notebook tucked under her arm. The air felt lighter, but the weight of the town's struggles lingered, rebuilt. Docks creaked under fresh waves. Families scraped by on meager savings, and old tensions simmered beneath the surface. Yet something new was stirring. The murals on the community center walls, painted by Sophia and her crew, glowed with color, telling stories of resilience. Laughter spilled from open windows, and the scent of shared meals warmed the night. Clara felt it in her chest, a fragile hope like a flame cupped against the wind. Beyond the town, the world churned with its own restless pulse. In 2025, cities thrummed with ambition and anxiety, skyscrapers gleamed, but their shadows hid burnout and loneliness. Social media feeds overflowed with curated lives, yet people felt more disconnected than ever. Political divides deepened, climate fears mounted, and the daily grind left little room for rest. Families ate meals in silence, distracted by screens. Co-workers competed rather than collaborated. Strangers passed each other without a glance. The world craved unity, a way to bridge the gaps, but the noise drowned out the call to come together. Clara's town, though small, mirrored this ache, a microcosm where people longed to belong but struggled to trust. Inside Clara's home, the flicker of progress held steady. Matteo's repair co-op was gaining traction, his hands busy with tools, his laughter a sound Clara hadn't heard in months. Sophia, once glued to her phone, now spent her days leading the cleanup crew, her confidence growing with each mural she painted. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Matteo retreated into silence, haunted by old insecurities. Sophia, for all her fire, still snapped when stressed, her words sharp enough to sting. Clara felt the strain too. Her notebook was filling faster than she could act, and her own doubts crept in. Was she doing enough? Could she keep this fragile hope alive? She thought of Pope Francis's words from Gaudete et Exsultate. We are all called to be holy by living our lives with love and by bearing witness in everything we do wherever we find ourselves. Holiness. Clara realized wasn't perfection. It was perseverance, a daily choice to love. Pope Francis has long called for a holiness rooted in community, a spirituality that binds people together. In a 2024 homily, he said, "We are not islands. We are a family called to build bridges of solidarity to see Christ in every face." This echoes Christ's teaching in John 17:21, that all of them may be one Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. For Clara, this was a challenge to move beyond small acts of mercy and toward something bigger, a vision of unity that could hold her town together. It meant seeing her neighbors not just as individuals, but as part of a shared story, a body where every part mattered. It meant trusting that her efforts, however small, were threads in a larger tapestry. Clara began with her family seeking to weave them closer. One Sunday, she suggested a new tradition, a weekly walk along the shore, just the three of them. Matteo hesitated, citing work, and Sophia rolled her eyes, but Clara persisted, her voice gentle but firm. That afternoon they walked the beach, the waves lapping at their feet. At first, the silence was awkward, broken only by the cry of gulls. Then Sophia picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, challenging Matteo to do better. He laughed, failing spectacularly, and soon they were competing, their voices mingling with the surf. As the sun dipped low, Clara shared a memory of her own childhood by the sea, and Matteo followed with a story of his first fishing trip. Sophia listened, her guard down, and for a moment they were one, a family not perfect, but together. In the town, Clara sought to build similar bridges. She noticed how people still clustered in familiar groups, fishermen with fishermen, teens with teens, newcomers on the margins. The community center was a hub, but it wasn't enough to unite everyone. Inspired by Pope Francis's call for solidarity, Clara proposed a town-wide project, a festival to celebrate the town's history and hope. She pitched it at the community center, her voice steady despite nervous glances. "We've all lost something," she said, "but we've also gained each other. Let's show it." The idea sparked debate. Some called it frivolous, others worried about cost, but Sophia's crew rallied, offering to design banners, and Matteo volunteered his co-op to build stalls. Slowly the town warmed to the idea, drawn by the chance to be part of something bigger. Clara leaned on Christ's example to guide her. In Mark 6:30-44, Jesus feeds 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, not by magic, but by inviting the crowd to share what they had. The miracle wasn't just the food, it was the unity, the way strangers became neighbors. Clara wanted her festival to do the same. She formed a planning group, deliberately mixing people who rarely spoke: Javier the fisherman, Mrs. Alvarez the widow, a shy newcomer named Elena who'd arrived after losing her home to floods. They met weekly, and Clara listened more than she spoke, letting their ideas shape the event. Javier suggested a fish fry. Mrs. Alvarez offered her grandmother's empanada recipe, and Elena, a former teacher, proposed storytelling for the kids. Each meeting built trust, turning strangers into collaborators. Practically, Clara wove unity into her days. She kept her notebook, but now she added connections, pairing a carpenter with a family needing repairs, linking a teen with a mentor, introducing neighbors who'd never met. She started coffee mornings at the community center, where people could drop in, share a mug, and talk. Some mornings were quiet. Others overflowed with chatter, but each one chipped away at isolation. Clara also made a point to greet people by name, especially those on the fringes Elena, who blushed at the attention. Mr. Torres, a gruff retiree, who softened when Clara asked about his garden. These small acts, rooted in Christ's command to love, were the glue of community. The festival planning wasn't smooth. Arguments flared over budgets, rain threatened to derail outdoor events, and old grudges resurfaced. One night, two fishermen stormed out of a meeting shouting about past slights. Clara followed them outside, her heart racing, but her voice calm. "You don't have to like each other," she said, "but we need you both." "Can you stay for the town?" They grumbled, but returned, and by the next meeting they were civil, even sharing a joke. Clara saw Pope Francis's vision in action. Solidarity means much more than acts of generosity. It means thinking and acting in terms of community. Fratelli tutti. Her town wasn't perfect, but it was trying. Clara's faith grew through these efforts. She began to see prayer as a way to align her heart with God's, to see her neighbors as He did. Each morning she sat by the sea, her notebook open, and prayed for the people in it. Javier's strength, Elena's courage, Sophia's fire. She thought of Christ's prayer for unity, His longing for His followers to be one. Her prayers were simple. "Help me build bridges. Show me who needs me today." They gave her clarity, a reminder that her work was part of a divine story. For those listening, Clara's story offers a call. Where can you build unity? It doesn't require a festival. If your workplace is divided, share a kind word or a coffee with a colleague you don't know. If your family feels distant, start a small tradition, a game night, a walk, a shared meal. If your community is fractured, introduce two people who might connect or host a gathering, however small. Pope Francis reminds us, every human being is my brother or sister, and together we can build a world of peace. Try this each week. Make one connection, reach out, listen, invite. Reflect on Christ's words in Matthew 18:20. For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. Your efforts, however small, are seeds of unity. The festival day arrived gray but dry, the air buzzing with nervous energy. Stalls lined the boardwalk, strung with lights Sophia's crew had scavenged. The scent of fried fish and empanadas mingled with the salt breeze. Clara moved through the crowd, her notebook tucked away, her heart full. She saw Javier grilling his kids, helping, Mrs. Alvarez laughing with Elena over a shared story, Mateo teaching a boy to tie a knot. Sophia's murals framed the scene, their colors a promise of hope. The storytelling tent was packed, kids giggling as Elena spun tales of the sea. Even Mr. Torres was there, handing out tomatoes from his garden. As dusk fell, the crowd gathered for a bonfire. Clara stood to speak, her voice steady. "We've been through storms," she said, "but we're here together. That's our strength." She didn't preach, but her words carried Christ's love, Pope Francis's vision. The fire crackled, and someone started singing a fisherman's shanty, then a hymn. Voices joined, uneven but earnest, weaving a harmony that held the night. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the beauty of it. These people, her people, won. The festival didn't erase the town's struggles. Bills still loomed, roofs still leaked, and tempers still flared. But it left a mark. Neighbors who'd never spoken now nodded in passing. The coffee mornings grew, The repair co-op expanded, and Sophia's crew started planning a community garden. Clara saw Christ's miracle of the loaves and fishes in her town, not in food, but in connection, in the way people shared their time, their stories, their hope. For Clara, the festival was a turning point. She began to trust that her efforts mattered, that her faith was enough. She thought of Pope Francis's words, "Holiness is not about doing extraordinary things, but about doing ordinary things with love." Her ordinary acts, listening, connecting, showing up, were building something sacred. She kept praying, kept serving, kept believing that unity was possible even in a broken world. For those walking this path, Clara's story is an invitation. You are called to be a bridge. Start where you are. If stress divides you, pause and pray for clarity. If disconnection isolates you, reach out to one person today. If conflict threatens, listen first, then speak with love. Reflect on John 13:35. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Your small steps toward unity are part of a larger story, one that echoes Christ's prayer and Pope Francis's call. As the bonfire's embers faded, Clara walked home with Matteo and Sophia, their steps in sync. The stars shone brighter now, the town quieter, but alive. Clara felt a certainty not in the future's outcome, but in the work itself, the work of loving, of uniting, of trusting that God was in every face she met. Her notebook weighted its pages ready for new names, new needs, new bridges to build. The story of her town, her family, her faith was far from over. It was just beginning. The morning after the festival, Clara woke to a quiet house, the kind of stillness that follows a storm's retreat. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting stripes across the wooden floor. She sat at the kitchen table, her notebook open, its pages crowded with names, needs, and dreams. The festival had left the town buzzing. Neighbors waved across fences. The community center hummed with new plans, and Sophia's murals stood as a testament to what hope could build. But Clara knew the glow wouldn't last on its own. The town still faced lean times. Fish stocks hadn't recovered, jobs were scarce, and the scars of loss ran deep. Her own family, though, closer, carried their own fragile threads. Matteo's confidence wavered, Sophia's fire could flare into rebellion, and Clara herself felt the weight of leading without breaking. She sipped her coffee, its warmth grounding her, and thought of Pope Francis's words from Evangelii Gaudium. We are not simply to proclaim the gospel, but to live it, to let it shape every moment of our lives. For Clara, this wasn't just a call to faith, it was a call to courage, to keep going when the path grew steep. The world beyond her town echoed that challenge. In 2025, life moved at a relentless pace. Cities throbbed with ambition, but their rhythm left people breathless. Commutes stretched longer, screens demanded more, and the pressure to succeed squeezed out space for rest. Families drifted not from conflict, but from exhaustion. Friendships frayed under the weight of packed schedules. Online voices clashed in endless cycles of outrage, each side convinced of their rightness. Climate fears loomed, larger economic gaps widened, and a quiet despair settled over those who felt left behind. People hungered for purpose, for a reason to keep going, but the world's noise made it hard to hear the call. Clara's town, with its weathered docks and stubborn hope, was a small mirror of this global longing, a place where courage could spark change if only someone kept the flame alive. In Clara's home, that flame burned unevenly. Mateo's repair co-op was thriving, his hands steady as he taught others to mend nets and rebuild homes. Sophia, now a leader among the teens, spent her days planning the community garden, her sketches of raised beds and flower rows pinned to the fridge. But progress brought its own tests. Mateo sometimes woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the fear of failing again. Sophia, for all her passion, clashed with Clara over curfews and choices her independence a double-edged sword. Clara felt the strain of holding them together, her own doubts louder now. Was she strong enough? Could she lead her family, her town, through another season of struggle? She turned to Christ's words in Luke 12:32. "Do not be afraid. Little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." Courage, she realized, wasn't the absence of fear. It was walking through it, trusting in a love greater than herself. Pope Francis has often spoken of this courage, a boldness rooted in faith and action. In a 2023 address, he said, "The Christian is not one who stands still, but one who moves, who risks, who dares to love even when it costs." This echoes Christ's call in Matthew 14:27, when he walks on water toward his disciples, saying, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." For Clara, this was a summons to step out to lead her town, not by solving every problem, but by inspiring others to rise. It meant trusting that her small acts, her listening, her serving, her persistence, could ignite a chain of courage, a movement of hope that could carry her community forward. Clara began with her family seeking to nurture their strength. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she found Mateo in the backyard sanding a plank for the co-op. She sat beside him, the scent of sawdust sharp in the air. "You're doing so much," she said, her voice soft. "But you don't have to carry it alone." Mateo paused, his hands still. "I'm scared I'll mess it up," he admitted. Clara nodded, sharing her own fears about Sophia, the town herself. They talked late into the night, not solving everything, but sharing the load. It was a small act of courage, this honesty, but it bound them closer, a reminder that vulnerability could be strength. With Sophia, courage looked like trust. Clara noticed her daughter's growing leadership, how she rallied the teens with a mix of grit and charm. But Sophia's late nights and bold ideas worried Clara, stirring memories of her own rebellious youth. Instead of tightening control, Clara chose to step back. One morning, she handed Sophia a key to the community center. "You're building something good," she said. "I trust you to take care of it." Sophia's eyes widened, then softened. "I won't let you down," she said, and for the first time in months, she hugged Clara fierce and quick. It was a risk, this trust, but it gave Sophia wings, and Clara felt the weight of worry lift just a little. In the town, Clara sought to spark courage in others. The festival had united people, but sustaining that unity required more than shared meals. It needed shared purpose. Inspired by Pope Francis's call to go to the peripheries, Clara focused on those at the edges, the newcomers like Elena, who still felt like outsiders, the elderly like Mr. Torres, whose wisdom was often ignored, the teens who drifted unsure of their place. She started a story circle at the community center, inviting people to share their histories, their hopes, their fears. The first night was sparse, just a handful of faces, but Clara persisted, her voice warm and welcoming. Elena spoke of her flooded hometown, her voice trembling but clear. Mr. Torres shared a tale of the town's founding, his gruff tone softening with pride. Slowly, others joined fishermen, mothers, kids, each story a thread weaving a tapestry of shared identity. Clara leaned on Christ's example to guide her. In John 21:15-17, Jesus asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And each time he commands, "Feed my sheep." This wasn't just about food, it was about nourishing souls calling others to rise. Clara saw her role not as a fixer, but as a shepherd, encouraging her town to step forward. She organized work days for the community garden, inviting everyone to dig, plant, and dream. She paired unlikely teams, teens with retirees, newcomers with locals watching as they learned from each other. When conflicts arose like a dispute over garden plots, Clara mediated with patience, asking, "How can we make this work for everyone?" Her courage wasn't loud, it was steady, a quiet insistence that they could be more. Practically, Clara wove courage into her days. She kept her notebook, but now she added goals helping Elena find a teaching job, connecting Mr. Torres with the garden crew, encouraging Javier to lead a fishing co-op. She made time to check in with people, not just to help, but to ask, "What do you want to build?" She started a bulletin board at the community center where people could post ideas, a tool library, a kids' soccer team, a book club. Each pin was a spark, a chance for someone to step up. Clara also modeled risk, sharing her own struggles at the story circle, her fears for Sophia, her doubts about leading. Her openness invited others to be brave to admit their own fears and dreams. The garden project tested this courage. Rain delayed planting supplies, ran low, and some grumbled about the effort. One afternoon, a group of teens frustrated by muddy soil threatened to quit. Clara joined them, her boots sinking as she dug beside them. "It's messy," she said, "but look at what we're making." She pointed to the rows they'd already planted, green sprouts peeking through. Sophia, stepping up, rallied the group with a challenge. "Let's finish one more row before we go." They did, laughing through the mud, and the next day they were back. Clara saw Pope Francis's vision in action. Courage is contagious. It spreads when we dare to hope together. Laudato Si. The garden wasn't just about food, it was about believing in tomorrow. Clara's faith deepened through these moments. She began to see prayer as a wellspring of courage, a way to draw strength from God's presence. Each dawn she walked to the shore, the waves a steady rhythm, and prayed for her town, its dreamers, its doubters, its doers. She thought of Christ's courage in Gethsemane, facing betrayal and death, yet saying, "Not my will, but yours. Be done." Luke 22:42. Her prayers were simple. "Give me the guts to keep going. Show me who needs a push." They steadied her, a reminder that she wasn't alone. For those listening, Clara's story offers a challenge. Where can you find courage? It doesn't require heroics. If work overwhelms you, take a small risk. Ask for help. Share an idea. Say no to one more task. If your family feels stuck, start an honest conversation, even if it's hard. If your community needs hope, lead one small effort, a cleanup, a meal, a kind word. Pope Francis reminds us, God does not ask for perfection, but for a heart that dares to love. Try this each day. Do one thing that scares you. Call a friend you've lost touch with. Speak up in a meeting. Help a stranger. Reflect on Christ's words in Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you. Your courage, however small, is a spark that can light the way. The garden's first harvest came on a crisp morning, the air sharp with salt. The town gathered, their hands stained with soil, their faces bright with pride. Rows of lettuce, carrots, and herbs stretched across the lot, a green promise against the gray. Clara watched as people shared the yield, Elena filling a basket for her neighbors, Mr. Torres teaching kids to pull carrots, Sophia beaming as she handed out flowers. The harvest wasn't huge, but it was enough to feed, to inspire, to prove they could build something lasting. That evening they held a potluck tables groaning with dishes made from the garden's bounty. Laughter mingled with the clink of plates, and Clara felt a surge of gratitude not for the food but for the people, her people daring to hope. The town wasn't whole yet. Jobs were still scarce, storms still loomed, and old wounds lingered, but courage had taken root. The fishing co-op grew with Javier at its helm, sharing boats and profits. Elena started a tutoring program, her confidence blooming. Mr. Torres led garden workshops, his gruff voice now a beacon for the kids. Sophia's crew planned a second garden, their sketches bolder now. Clara didn't lead every effort, but her courage, her willingness to risk, to trust, to persist, had set the town alight. For Clara, the harvest was a milestone, a sign that faith and action could bear fruit. She thought of Pope Francis's words. The gospel is not a fairy tale. It is a living story written in the lives of those who dare to follow it. Her life, her town, was part of that story. She kept praying, kept serving, kept believing that courage could carry them through. Her notebook grew thicker, its pages a map of a town rebuilding not just its docks, but its heart. For those walking this path, Clara's story is an invitation. You are called to be bold. Start where you are. If fear holds you back, pray for strength, then take one step. If doubt clouds your vision, share it with someone you trust. If your community falters, lead with love, not control. Reflect on 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Your small acts of courage are part of a larger story, one that echoes Christ's bravery and Pope Francis's call to risk. As the potluck wound down, Clara stepped outside the stars bright above. Mateo joined her, his hand finding hers, and Sophia followed, her laughter trailing. The town glowed not with perfection, but with possibility. Clara felt a quiet fire within a fire of faith, of love, of courage. Her notebook weighted its pages, ready for new dreams, new risks, new ways to serve. The story of her town, her family, her faith was alive, and she was ready to write its next chapter. One bold step at a time. The first frost of the season dusted Clara's town, a thin shimmer on the grass that caught the dawn's light. From her porch, she watched the harbor breathe its waters calm but cold, reflecting the pale sky. The community garden's last harvest was stored, its beds mulched for winter, and the town had settled into a rhythm of resilience. Neighbors shared firewood. The fishing co-op thrived, and the community center glowed with evening classes and laughter. Yet the scars remained. Winter promised lean months with fewer tourists and tighter budgets. Some families still struggled, their homes patched, but not whole. Clara felt the weight too. Her notebook now a worn companion brimmed with new needs, a widow needing heat, a family facing eviction, a teen battling despair. She wrapped her scarf tighter, her breath clouding in the chill, and recalled Pope Francis's words from Corrida Amazonia. The path of peace is not a sprint. It is a pilgrimage, walked with patience and love. For Clara, this was a call to endure, to hold fast to hope when the world felt cold. Beyond the town, that coldness spread. In 2025, the world spun faster. Cities pulsed with innovation but groaned under inequality. Commutes choked with traffic screens, buzzed with breaking news, and the pressure to keep up left people hollow. Families ate rushed meals, their conversations clipped. Workplaces rewarded hustle over heart. Online anger flared faster than understanding. Climate shifts brought harsher winters. Economic strain tightened belts, and a quiet fatigue settled over those chasing dreams that never materialized. People yearned for meaning, for a light to guide them, but the world's clamor buried the call. Clara's town, with its frost-kissed streets and stubborn spirit, was a small echo of this global ache, a place where endurance could kindle hope if someone kept the fire burning. In Clara's home, that fire flickered but held. Mateo's repair co-op had grown his hands, now teaching as much as fixing his confidence a steady warmth. Sophia, a force in the community garden, planned spring plantings with a zeal that lit up the house. But winter brought new tests. Mateo's late nights at the co-op strained his energy, leaving him short-tempered. Sophia, juggling school and leadership, hid her stress behind a fierce front, her snaps sharper now. Clara felt the pull of her own limits. Her days stretched thin, her heart heavy with the town's needs. She thought of Christ's words in John 16:33. "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Endurance, she realized, wasn't just surviving, it was loving through the cold, trusting that spring would come. Pope Francis has often spoken of this endurance, a faith that persists through hardship. In a 2024 homily, he said, "To follow Christ is to carry the cross, not as a burden, but as a bridge to others, a way to share their pain and hope." This echoes Christ's call in Matthew 24:13. "The one who stands firm to the end will be saved." For Clara, this was a summons to keep walking, to hold her town together, not by erasing its struggles, but by embracing them with love. It meant seeing winter not as an end, but as a season to deepen roots, to strengthen bonds, to trust that God's light shone even in the dark. Clara began with her family, seeking to anchor them through the cold. One evening, as frost coated the windows, she found Mateo at the kitchen table, his hands gripping a ledger, his brow furrowed. The co-op was solvent, but barely, and he feared letting his team down. Clara sat beside him, her voice soft. "You're not alone in this," she said, resting her hand on his. Instead of solutions, she offered a question. "What do you need to keep going?" Mateo exhaled, admitting his exhaustion, his fear of failing. They prayed together, a simple plea for strength, and agreed to share the co-op's load. Clara would handle outreach, freeing Mateo to focus on repairs. It was a small step, but it steadied them, a shared cross that lightened the weight. With Sophia, endurance meant patience. Clara noticed her daughter's late nights, her sketches now mixed with scribbled worries, school pressures, garden plans, fears of letting others down. Instead of pressing, Clara invited Sophia to bake bread, a ritual from her own childhood. They kneaded dough in the warm kitchen, the scent of yeast rising. At first, Sophia was quiet, her hands tense. Then, as they shaped loaves, she spoke about her stress, her dreams, her fear of burning out. Clara listened, her hands steady, and shared her own struggles, admitting her doubts about leading the town. "We don't have to be perfect," she said. "We just have to keep showing up." Sophia nodded her shoulders, easing, and they baked late, their laughter warming the house. It was a moment of endurance, a root deepened in love. In the town, Clara sought to foster this same resilience. Winter's bite isolated people, fewer gathered at the community center, and old tensions resurfaced as resources dwindled. Inspired by Pope Francis's call to accompany one another, Clara focused on those struggling most, the widow Mrs. Ramos, whose heater had failed, the family facing eviction, the Garcias who hid their shame, the teen Lucas who'd stopped coming to the garden, his eyes shadowed. She started a winter circle at the community center, a weekly gathering for warmth, soup, and support. She invited everyone, but especially those on the edges, knocking on doors with a thermos of coffee and a quiet, "We'd love to see you." The first night was small, but Clara's warmth drew them in. Mrs. Ramos bundled in scarves, the Garcias hesitant but hungry, Lucas slouching but present. Clara leaned on Christ's example to guide her. In Luke 24:13-35, Jesus walks with two disciples on the road to Emmaus, listening to their despair, sharing their journey, and revealing himself in the breaking of bread. He doesn't erase their pain. He accompanies them through it, kindling hope. Clara saw her role as this kind of companion, walking with her town through winter's dark. She organized warmth drives, collecting blankets and coats, and paired volunteers to deliver them. She connected Mrs. Ramos with the church's repair fund, ensuring her heater was fixed. She helped the Garcias negotiate with their landlord, securing a payment plan. With Lucas, she sat quietly asking about his dreams, learning he loved music but felt lost. She introduced him to Elena, who'd started a choir, giving him a spark to chase. Practically, Clara wove endurance into her days. Her notebook now tracked not just needs but strengths. Mrs. Ramos's knack for knitting, the Garcias' cooking skills, Lucas's ear for melody. She matched people to tasks, inviting them to contribute. Mrs. Ramos taught knitting at the winter circle, the Garcias cooked for the soup nights, Lucas joined the choir. She also kept the bulletin board alive, pinning new ideas, a carpool network, a firewood co-op, a storytelling night. Each pin was a lifeline, a chance to keep going. Clara modeled endurance too, sharing her own fatigue at the winter circle, admitting, "Some days I'm scared we won't make it, but you all keep me going." Her honesty invited others to persevere, to see their struggles as shared. The winter circle grew despite the cold. People brought their fears, job losses, sick kids, broken pipes, and their gifts, a pot of chili, a repaired chair, a song. One night Mrs. Ramos gave Lucas a knitted scarf, her hands trembling but proud. The Garcias shared a recipe, their smiles brighter. Lucas sang a folk tune, his voice raw but clear, and the room stilled tears in some eyes. Clara saw Pope Francis's vision alive. Peace is built by walking together, by carrying each other's burdens. Fratelli tutti. The circle wasn't a cure, but it was a hearth warming the town through winter's bite. Clara's faith deepened in these moments. She saw prayer as a lifeline, a way to root herself in God's strength. Each morning she sat by the frosted window, her notebook open, and prayed for her town. It's weary, it's hopeful, it's brave. She thought of Christ's endurance on the cross, his love unbroken even in agony. John 19:30. Her prayers were simple. Help me stay. Show me who needs me. They gave her stamina, a reminder that her work was God's work, woven into a story of redemption. For those listening, Clara's story offers a call. Where can you endure? It doesn't require grand gestures. If work drains you, carve out one moment to rest and pray. If your family struggles, listen patiently, sharing their load. If your community falters, show up even when it's hard. Pope Francis reminds us, God walks with us in our weakness, giving us the strength to carry on. Try this each day. Choose one act of endurance. Stay 5 minutes longer with someone hurting. Finish one task you dread. Offer one kind word. Reflect on Hebrews 12:1. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Your persistence, however small, is a light in the dark part of Christ's victory and Pope Francis's pilgrimage. Winter stretched on, but the town held fast. The fishing co-op shared catches, ensuring no one went hungry. Elena's choir grew Lucas's voice a quiet anchor. The Garcias opened their home for soup nights when the community center was too cold. Mrs. Ramos's knitting circle made mittens for kids, her laughter a new warmth. Sophia planned a spring festival, her sketches now maps of hope. Mateo's co-op fixed heaters, his pride steadying him. Clara didn't lead every effort, but her endurance, her choice to stay, to love, to trust, kept the fire alive. One evening, the winter circle gathered under a rare clear sky, stars sharp above. They shared a meal, the room thick with steam and chatter. Clara stood to speak, her voice soft but clear. "Winter's hard," she said, "but we're here together. That's our miracle." She didn't quote scripture, but her words carried Christ's love. Pope Francis's hope. Someone started a hymn, voices rising uneven but strong. Clara felt her heart swell, not with triumph, but with gratitude for these people, this place, this shared journey. Lucas's scarf, Mrs. Ramos's mittens, the Garcias' soup. They were signs of endurance, proofs of love. The town wasn't whole. Bills piled up, pipes froze, and doubts lingered. But endurance had woven them tighter. Neighbors checked on each other, the choir sang at the church, and the community garden's beds waited ready for spring. Clara saw Christ's Emmaus road in her town, not in miracles, but in companionship, in the way people walked together through the cold. For Clara, the winter circle was a testament, a sign that faith could outlast hardship. She thought of Pope Francis's words, "The cross is not the end. It is the beginning of a life given for others." Her life, her town was that beginning. She kept praying, kept serving, kept trusting that endurance would carry them to spring. Her notebook grew its pages, a chronicle of a town holding on not just to survive, but to live. For those walking this path, Clara's story is an invitation you are called to endure. Start where you are. If despair creeps in, pray for hope, then act. If exhaustion weighs you, share it with someone, then rest. If your community wavers, be the one who stays. Reflect on Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Your small acts of endurance are threads in a tapestry of peace woven through Christ's love and Pope Francis's vision. As the hymn faded, Clara stepped outside, the frost crunching under her boots. Matteo and Sophia joined her, their breaths clouding in the starlight. The town slept, its lights faint but steady. Clara felt a quiet certainty, a certainty in the God who walked with her, in the love that bound her family, in the town that refused to break. Her notebook waited, its pages ready for new names, new needs, new seasons. The story of her town, her faith, her pilgrimage was alive, and she was ready to walk it one enduring step at a time.